Peter, the cold. Here we go. We are live to Facebook. Good afternoon. It is just after 3 minutes past 1 on this wonderful Thursday in our first HubLive for 2021. It is a real pleasure and a privilege to be back with you today and for the coming year. So we have some wonderful HubLives planned, and we're hoping to make them extremely valuable. And we really want to kick that theme off, the value of these HubLives. Want to take that to the next level, and that is reflected in today's guest. I have the wonderful Katrina Donaghy with me from Civic Ledger. How are you?
I'm very well, very well. It's good to see you again, Elise, after our hanging out with each other in Rock Vegas last year. So it's good to be here.
Oh, thank you so much for agreeing to do the HubLive with me today. We're going to share your valuable lessons in building a tech startup. And what's really interesting, going back just in a bit of history of the Smart Hub, going back 4 years, really struggled to see any tech startups in Rocky. But I'm pleased to report that 4 years on, that we have some really great, promising tech startups in our ecosystem. And so I know that there are many, many people hanging out for today's HubLive to understand the lessons, because so much better to learn from other people than have to go through all those hurdles yourself. So thank you so much for agreeing. So tell us a little bit about your story first. Where did you come from and what made you decide to build a tech startup?
Okay, so I guess, first of all, it's really important just to clarify that I did have a career prior to, stepping into the world of startups. So I worked in government for many, many years. I worked in the state government and in the local government, and then I did a stint in utilities and the not-for-profit sector. But I sort of dabbled in startups back in 2003 before smartphones. So it's very, very different. No co-working facilities back then or hubs or anything like that. Everything was paper, which was really interesting. I went back to uni. I already had completed my undergrad in humanities. So I'm a sociologist, political scientist by trade. And I went back to uni at 2003 to do a graduate certificate in entrepreneur studies and venture development. So I wanted to get some practical skills around looking at ideas and seeing whether they had the components or the core elements to actually create a startup. And obviously failed miserably because it wasn't the right time, and then went back into the workforce. So it wasn't until 2015 when I was in my last paid job, for anyone who is a startup and understands what that means when you're in your last paid job. And I remember working in the not-for-profit sector and was given an opportunity to look at social technologies to better understand information to do better service delivery. And that was in a health informatics space. And the organisation that I was working with was not interested in doing anything like that. But I kind of went, yes. So I said yes to something that became a catalyst for the change of why I'm sitting here today. And that health informatics conference gave me the confidence to work with some interesting people. I quit my job, joined their startup, and then that led me to blockchain technology, which was in around November 2015. And that was the change for me, because I finally found a technology it found me, that I could understand. And because I came from government and understanding public sector problems, because I solved a lot of them, I found this technology a really great fit. And then serendipitously joined a meetup. So meetups, very important. I went to a meetup and I met my co-founder, and that was in April 2016. And on the back of Lucas and I finding each other, Lucas was the tech guy and I was the front end person. We were able to secure a contract with the Queensland government. We weren't even a company, and we delivered the very first proof of concept, looking at how to digitise a government-issued asset, which is a right, like something that gives us something that we can do, which is value. We issued that right, or that entitlement via, this is really old, we issued it via the Bitcoin blockchain using coloured coin, because Ethereum was still sort of emerging. And we did a proof of concept with the Queensland government. And because we got market validation of a technology that could solve a problem, it led to us then creating Civic Ledger, and Civic Ledger was born on the 21st of September 2016.
Wow, what a phenomenal story. Okay, so I'd like us to unpack just some of the terminology that you've used, because it's really important for context to understand when we're talking about tech startups, what we're talking about and how that is distinctly different to starting a new company that is delivering a service or a product to your local market.
Yeah.
So can you just give me a few of your definition, or what is your definition of a startup?
Well,
and when you say tech startup, how does that work?
Well, obviously a startup is a couple of things. It's either you have an idea and you want to validate it in a market, and then undertake product development. You're largely funded through, it's usually your side hustle in the first instance. You have a job, part-time job or a job, and you're actually building this from a side hustle. You're not have any raises yet, you haven't done any raises, but what you're trying to do is find validation from your first customer. And then obviously then formulating how to convey the message of the problem that you are solving. So why is it a problem, how you are solving it, and why you are different, and then demonstrating why the market will buy something from you. So I think one of the most important things from a startup perspective is getting your first customer. It's different, like obviously we're talking 5 years now since we started, or 4 and a bit years, and things always change. But way back then, we saw the emergence of co-working facilities in Brisbane, because I'm in Brisbane. So we saw fish burners come into Brisbane, which made a massive difference to our ecosystem. All of a sudden, we had a place to go, similar to you, that we could actually find other startups that were on the same journey as us, and we could actually support each other. And also we were able to get access to pro bono services, which is critical, but also find the scaffolding to help us grow. So I think a startup is pre-revenue. It is founders, so you don't really have any first hires yet, and you've got an idea and you think that you can actually solve something that the market actually wants you to solve.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much, Padraig and Kerry, for joining us today. I'm here with the amazing Katrina. And we're talking about the lessons in building a tech startup. And as she just mentioned, she's been building Civic Ledger since 2016. So you're well on your way. If you have any questions, please feel free to post those in the comments on Facebook, and we'll have a go at answering. Well, Katrina will have a go at answering those questions for you. Okay, so you mentioned a couple of lessons already. So the first thing is, the most important thing, this is what I'm hearing you say, and I'm just checking with you. One of the most important first steps in building a startup is to get a customer so that you can validate this problem that you're solving and also the solution that you're providing. Can you talk a bit more about that?
Yeah,
and how to go about getting your first customer?
It's a really challenging, it's a very, you could say that this position that I'm just about to talk about is very polemic. Because on one hand, you will get the startup community saying all you need to have is an idea, and then go do a raise. You're pre-revenue, go do a raise. The challenge with that is that it's very, very difficult to negotiate strongly with VCs if you're pre-revenue and you haven't got your first customer, because they can come and actually take your company away from you, which is not a great thing in the first place. So it's critical for sustainability is that you look for your first customer, because when you get your first customer, they become your champion, and they're able to then get you your next customer and your next customer. So looking at operational revenue is, for me, a much more sustainable way to think about your startup, rather than thinking that you have to go out and do a raise, because to do a raise takes nearly 6 to 8 months of your time as a founder. And if you're trying to actually build out your product to get market validation, to secure your customers so you can develop your pitch deck, but you're being distracted by trying to raise capital on something that you haven't even validated, you'll find that the market has moved. And you may have actually missed the opportunity to get your product into the market first and become that leader. So it's about choosing what is the right method for you and for what your values are. And I guess I'm going to talk a little bit later about values and making sure you stick to them. But those are the challenges, because when you start the journey, everybody is wanting to be, killing it, doing all the wins, get your t-shirt, get your hoodie, get on this deck, get on the stage, pitch your idea, have lots of beers. The thing about that is that you waste a lot of time. You become extremely distracted by trying to be cool, by trying to be something that you really don't need to be, because VCs aren't interested in the hype. They want to know your numbers. They want to know, what are you doing? What are you building? How are you building it? Why do you think that you are going to beat this race as opposed to somebody else? And that is really important, because you have to do a lot of thinking. You have to do a lot of discussions and, sitting in these places with Elise and actually engaging with other people and actually throwing your ideas around. Because it is very easy to get caught up with the hype and think that that's what an entrepreneur does. And you'll find that you'll be out of business within 12 months because the market's moved.
Yeah, understood. Share with us more of your lessons.
Oh, lots. The thing too is about when entrepreneurs say that they've had a really great time for for the duration of their startup, they're actually lying to you big time. Look, there are moments when you sort of go, I should not have done it that way. So some of the lessons that I would probably have to say, and look, I'm a really open book as well, so I'm not a founder that will sit there and tell you this is all glamorous, because it's not. You really have to have a very strong conversation with yourself and ask yourself whether this is what you truly, truly want to do. Are you happy to forego income? Are you happy to forego a lot of things to bring this, your company to where it wants to, where you believe it can be? So one of the first lessons I think was I didn't quite understand in the early days the ins and outs of capital raising, because my other co-founders had expertise in that area, and I sat back on that. And I didn't actually ask questions that I should have done way back at that time, because I really believed that they had my interests at heart, and they did. But what happened was that when I became the CEO of the company, because I didn't start as CEO, I was really doing business development, I inherited a lot of things that I didn't quite understand. And it took me a really long time and a lot of lessons to realize that when it comes to really critical decisions around your capital table, around your shareholdings, and all of those legal stuff, which is quite boring, you have to be present. And if you don't understand the language in the shareholders agreement or in your constitution, or how a capital table works, or how an information memorandum works, you need to get advice. It's not cool to go, it'll be okay, somebody else will look after that for me, because 5 years later down the track, when you've got toxic co-founders and your capital table is a mess, VCs will not touch you. So you really have to be thinking, even though it's really boring, you've got to think, okay, what about I've got to have shareholders agreement. I've got to know my capital table. Do not put friends and family on your capital table. Do not give away your equity for $5,000. Do not do that. It's really critical that you hold out as long as you can before you start thinking about a raise. And when you do a raise, it has to be smart money. Be disciplined. Don't just take your first buck that comes along, because you could find that you're not compatible with your investor, and then they will actually sack you. They'll actually stack the board, and then they'll actually get rid of you. So it's critical that even though that these are really, really uncool, uninteresting things, because all you want to do is build product, get it out in the market and do your pitching, but you've really got to do your foundational stuff. Get your shareholders agreement, your constitution, get a good lawyer, get a good accountant, start thinking about your numbers. And I know it doesn't sound really interesting from an entrepreneur's perspective, but those are my lessons, because I wasn't taking control. I wasn't taking control of the books at that time. And we had an accountant, and the accountant kept me at long distance. They just go, no, it's all right, Katrina, it's okay. And then when I finally took the courage to sack my accountant, and I then opened up the books, it wasn't very pretty what I saw. We had squandered our first raise. We raised our first raise of $700,000, and we squandered it because I didn't know the numbers, and I didn't know how to best apply the capital in an R&D perspective rather than thinking from an operational perspective. So if I was to give you one piece of advice, when you think about this journey, you've got your co-founders, have that conversation, get your shareholders agreement, get your constitution, get a good lawyer. And when you think about bringing on an investor, it's you interviewing them because this is your company. And it's their privilege to be on your capital table, not the other way around.
Okay, excellent. So you did say that you were going to share with us 3 things that you wish you knew before you started. So would that be number 1?
Number 1, yeah. It's hard because you sort of think, oh, but I'm not going to understand it. This is why Elise is here. This is why she's created this hub in Rockhampton, is because that's where you go. When you don't know something, you go to the hub and you engage with Elise and say, is there any pro bono legal advice that I can get around my shareholders agreement? And if you take half an hour out of your day, it will save you 3 years of pain when you have to unravel that, and expensive legal advice as well. First thing, make sure you use the resources from your hub, and be honest. Don't sit there and think that you have to know everything, because you're not going to know everything. Second piece of advice is hiring. Okay. One of the things that us startups like to do is we like to create everyone as a chief. Everybody's got to be a chief. All the founders have to be chiefs. Chief this, chief this, chief this, and then you've got nobody doing anything. And all of a sudden, all your money's gone because you're paying yourselves a stupid salary when you should be foregoing a salary and paying really good people to do really good work that you don't want to do. So hires are the first thing. So don't get your ego, don't get all egotistical that I need to be a chief officer, chief executive officer, and I need a chief technology officer, and I need a chief financial officer, and I need, just don't do that. Hold yourselves back and think about your first hires. And one of the most important hires that you can do in the first instance is someone to help you with your branding and your marketing and your website. Because if they help you get your branding and your messaging and your website in synchronization with your messages as your product and your values, that makes it a lot more easier when you go to pitch, because everybody will know what business you're in and everybody will understand your messaging. So if you're going to make your first hire, it's that. And also perhaps a junior developer as well, just to sort of start to get them on the early stuff around setting up. And I'm going to just give you another tip of advice. Make sure you use, if you're a tech startup, make sure you use open source software as much as you can. So you Git, really, really important, Git. So make sure you're putting your code, being very, very open and source. So I know I'm just diverting a little bit, but this is also really critical. Atlassian is probably some of the best tools that you can use. Jira, Trello, those sort of things, and you can get them as a low cost. You can get them free until they sort of step up a bit, but look for all your freebies. Just get your freebies. Don't go and invest in software that you're just not going to use. If I was to do my time again, because we're now working on it, is your wiki. So Confluence in Atlassian has a method for you to capture your wiki. And when we think about a wiki, it's your DNA. You know, it's about your policies, your values, your missions. It's about how you're building your tech, choosing your tech tools. So when you onboard new staff, which is critical, they're actually going to know exactly what to expect when they work with you. And that's really important, because one of the things you want to do is not be the company. You want the company to have its own identity. So eventually you want it to work without you because you want to do other stuff. So be thinking about that sort of stuff at the start. So cap tables, share tables, all that sort of stuff, critical. Do not think that that's not important. Secondly, do not make everyone a chief, and don't just hold back on paying yourself a ridiculous amount of money. Your first hires, think about somebody who's going to help you with those fundamentals, and then think about obviously your software and things like that, what's critical. Go for your freebies and think about those systems and processes that are going to make things easier for you as you grow. Because when you get to the point where you want to do a cap raise, they're going to want to look at your data room, your due diligence, your DD, and your DD is really critical. So if you're the chief, if you're the co-founder, and Elise will be able to help you with this, but start setting up your DD room right from get-go. That's where you hold your certificates, your ABNs, your shareholders agreements, all of those things, because investors want to see them. I've got so much, but probably the other thing that I'm just going on the top of my head, do not avoid doing your meetings. If you don't have a board yet, which is fine, don't do that yet. You really need to show that you're meeting together and you're holding a meeting, and make sure you document it and throw it into the data room. Keep that as a good pattern, because what happens too is that the VCs will come back and they'll want to look at how you've grown, what sort of agenda items you had on in your meetings, how you were thinking, how you were managing risks and making decisions and all that sort of stuff, because investors don't invest in product, they invest in the founders. And they're looking for those founders that are actually thinking about this stuff. Because when investors come looking at you, they're actually bringing other people's money with them. And they want to invest in you because they want to believe that you are the ones that's going to deliver 10 or 15 times in 4 years' time.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And I like the fact that you can start documenting early on so that you can show on top of everything. Wonderful. Okay, are those your lessons? Anything else that comes to mind? I know you're a wealth of information.
No, I guess it's interesting because you find that every year is different. Like obviously in your first year is a very different experience to your second year and your third year and your fourth year. I guess it's just things that you think that you have to do to get legitimacy. Like, we did stupid things like, we took a lease of an office. Like, thank God for, I know COVID's not a good thing, but what COVID was able to show is that you could be still a legitimate startup and not have an office. Yeah. So, we've wasted so much money on taking a stupid office in the city and paying that rent every week. I could have employed 2 people. So think lean, think seriously lean. Look at your, okay, this is probably a segue into what I really wanted to talk about. And again, it's going to be absolutely boring. But one of the things that I did do last year, even though it was year 4 for me, is that I went to CEO school. BDO, which is a mid-tier accounting firm. They're all over the world, but BDO, when I was in Fishburners, we had the business manager. His name was Mark Orchard. He's the same as Elise. Mark Orchard was, helping us all the startups, and he was frustrated because what he was seeing was that the Fishburners and the ecosystem were not talking to founders around financial management because it just wasn't cool. It wasn't like, let's go find everything out about your zero. It's like, we just talk about it. So Mark got really frustrated and he went to BDO and did a pitch to them and said, I think we can add a lot of value to the startup community if we offer CEO school. And they laughed at him. They said, that's just silly, Mark. Go have a look now. It is the biggest program in this country of giving startups and founders an opportunity to get away from the noise and focus on what it takes to be a CEO and what our roles are. And one of the most important things is financial literacy. We have to know our numbers. We have to know what a profit and loss is, what goes in the P&L, what goes into the balance sheet, what your cash position is, what your burn rate is. Now, for a startup that's starting, you kind of go, but I've got no money. It's like, I know you may not have any money, but you've got to start thinking about your chart of accounts. You've got to think about your accountant. And you sort of go, but I'm still too early. If you put these things in place right from get-go and get help, you will find that when you are 2 years into your startup and you really are ready to scale, you don't have to go back and fix up things. You'll have a good handle on your numbers, because at the end of the day, VCs only want to know numbers. They don't, they can look at your product, but they're smart, but they want to know, how have you grown? Where are your customers? Do you know your customer? And these are the really important things about being a startup. And I guess it's hard because we get a lot of stuff thrown at us all the time. It's really noisy. Like, everybody sees the ones that are actually killing it. Like, if we think about Atlassian or Afterpay and all that sort of stuff. And I won't talk about Afterpay because it's not my favorite business model. But when we think about Atlassian, it took them 12 years to an IPO. So it's not about saying, well, I'm 12 months into my startup, why aren't I a unicorn? It's because it takes 6 years before you become that company that is likely to scale internationally. So you've got to have a lot of patience with yourself, but you've got to constantly innovate. Critical is your R&D. So if you are using novel technology, if you're a technology startup and you are playing with novel tech like blockchain or IoT or AI and all of that sort of novel stuff, Elise will help you with this, but make sure that you understand your R&D and that what you can claim when it comes to your tax time, because your R&D is going to be your lifeline for your next financial year. And there are consultants out there to help you. Be careful, because some of them will want to charge you a shitload of money and take a lot of money out of you. But really think about your R&D, because you've got to have that cycle of innovating and putting it into product. Agile, iterate. I think I said to you, Elise, that one of the things that I've seen startups do, some of the startups that I've known over the years, is that they've hidden away for 12 months or 2 years and tried to build a cannonball, a big cannonball, and invest and put so much time in it, agony, sinking the money in, and then coming out and the market's gone, we don't want that. So you've got to build little things and test it, and then iterate and pivot, because you really got to test a lot of things before you actually land on, that's the product, that's the platform, now we can go hard. And you don't have a lot of money, so don't go build cannonballs. Do not. And I
like the bullets analogy. It's a really good one.
Because they're quick. I mean, they don't hurt as big as a cannonball, but it's just critical that you adopt. I mean, if you're a tech startup, you're going to use this anyway. You're going to use agile and iteration and things like that. But even if you're not working with tech, don't spend your time trying to perfect the UI. Don't do that. That's where all the money goes. You want to be working on your code. You want to make sure it's actually meeting the standards and making sure it's legal and it's going to work and it's going to stand up to an audit and stuff like that. Yeah. So.
Excellent. Hey, Daniel. Hey, John. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're obviously sharing some really great, insightful lessons in building a tech startup, and I know that both of you are really interested in the subject. If you have any questions for Katrina, please feel free to post those in the comments and we'll get to them shortly. So tell us more about the relationships that you can build with customers early on, and whether they should inform your product development.
So we've made, and for those probably that just joining us, I work with a tech called blockchain, and for a lot of people who probably actually know what that is, blockchain is what we call an emerging tech. It used to be called nascent when I first started. It was nascent. It was that thing that not many people knew what it actually meant. But blockchain, there's a lot of language around blockchain and people get really confused. They kind of go, isn't it that crypto thing? And you kind of go, well, if you're talking about the Bitcoin blockchain, yes, because the Bitcoin blockchain is fueled by BTC, because you need to incentivize the miners. If you're talking about Ethereum, which is another public blockchain, yes, you're talking about the Ether. But blockchain is the underlying digital infrastructure that enables us to securely share data with one another, and using things such as cryptography, decentralization, immutability, and things like that. And it's really cool for solving problems whereby you have a shared interest in a transaction, but you can't get access to each other's databases because you've got firewalls and all that sort of stuff in different systems, and they don't interoperate. So this is about solving problems that require shared infrastructure. Anyway, so we've been playing around for a little while in this space, and so the question again, Elise, was...
So the relationship that you have with your customers,
yes,
did they inform the product development?
Yes. So what we did is we made decisions in the early days, because blockchain technology is a complex tech. It's actually governance. It's not necessarily coming in, plugging and playing. It's a SaaS, and you can go log on and do things with it. It requires a completely change in the way we think about data, and we think about systems, and we think about how we work together as industries, because all of a sudden you go from competition to cooperation. So we agreed right from the get-go that we needed to co-create our solutions with our customers, because it was really, really early. We kind of knew, well, obviously we got market validation, but we kind of knew where this tech made sense in government. But when you're 2016 and it's now 2021, and you're early like we were, it took some opportunity for us to explore solving a problem with the customer in a very controlled environment. Because way back, we were lucky, back in 2017, strangely enough, a couple of governments in Australia were exploring this technology. They use the word exploring because we haven't seen much of it in the last few years. But so we responded to an opportunity. We just delivered our first proof of concept with the Queensland government, and that gave us confidence, because we kind of knew that you could look at a license, you could digitize it, it goes into a registry, it becomes immutable, and then it could be shared securely and safely and issued. So the Australian government had some problem statements out in 2017 through the BREE program, the Business Research and Innovation Initiative. It's called BREE, B-R-I-I. And one of the problems that they wanted to solve was the problem of water trading, well, water markets in this country. And if anyone who understands water understands that we have a problem in our country where we can't agree on who's got what. So we see a lot of commission of inquiries, we see a lot of court cases, we see a lot of it in the news, because we can't get agreement on who has what, how much has been traded, and for what price. So the Australian government recognised this a long time ago, and they thought that the problem was because there was a lack of information in the market. And we applied to this program, and we were only 6 weeks old, and we were very lucky that we got selected. We were the only tech company in the group. There was 4 of us working on the problem. And because we are, how should I say, very focused on what we have to solve, we actually tested the problem and found that the problem was wrong. And this is the thing about what you do when you're a tech, you start up, you want to know, what is the problem that I need to solve? How do we know that this is the right problem? Let's test some hypotheses. Let's verify our assumptions and then work out what is the best way to solve it. Not the other way around where you put the tech first and shove the problem into it. Don't do that. Just ends in tears. And we were selected, and we got to work with the customer for 3 months, only to deliver a feasibility study. But we didn't lean in with blockchain in the first instance. We wanted to make sure we understood the problem, and we found that their problem was incorrect. We found that the problem why we had problems with the water markets in this country was not because of lack of information. It was because the trade itself was too hard, way too hard. And then as a result, we delivered the feasibility study. But this is a lesson of timing. We delivered a feasibility study, and this is in 2017, and identified that blockchain technology would be a suitable technology to solve the problem of transparency in the water markets because of its opacity, lack of data interoperability, and not knowing the actual price of water. And we were assessed by the Entrepreneur Committee, the Australian Entrepreneurs Committee, in July 2017, and we were rejected. You know, this is the stuff that you go through. You sort of go, hang on here, but this completely makes sense. Of course this makes sense. And the reason why they told us, they gave us this, you know, they gave us raving reviews for being innovative. But 2017 was very different to 2021. And they basically said that they didn't believe that we could deliver a full marketplace within 18 months because they weren't sure that the regulatory environment would be suitable for our technology. And that is one of the things that you learn as a startup too. If you're playing around with nascent technology or emerging tech, you've really got to understand regulation. This is why you have reg tech and all this sort of stuff. You've got to understand the environment that you're working in and really understand, is the legal environment or the regulatory environment ready for this tech? And it wasn't back in 2017. So we crashed, you know, we sort of went to ourselves, well, that's it. One of my co-founders basically said, well, we gave it a really great shot there, didn't we? Perhaps nobody's ever going to want blockchain. So how about we quit? And that was the conversation that we had in, you know, a year after we started. That one of the co-founders went, you know what? I don't think we're going to do this. Is going to go anywhere. It's time to call it a day. And I kind of went, no, I don't think so. And this is the thing about having that tenacity. You do get pushed back, and you will get rejected. But this is why you sort of go, why am I doing this? Because you will go through this all the time, and you can either say, oh, well, I quit, which is fine. But you can always go back to your day job. Or you can say, well, perhaps it's not the right time, but what else can we do? What else is happening? And that's when our next opportunity happened, and we got selected to work with IP Australia on solving a really great challenge around intellectual property, and our work got presented to WIPO in Geneva. And now where we sit in 2021, our water ledger is now being delivered up in Mariba Dambulla. We've done our very first trial for water ledger and trading. Yes, it took us 4 years. A lot of door slamming, And this is the thing, you can't just say, okay, get the door slammed and it's all over. You've got to really dig deep, but you really got to have the support, like the stuff that the Hub does with Elise. You've got to keep yourself engaged to ensure you get that support back, because it becomes a very lonely place being a founder, especially when you get rejected. But look, we've been through a lot, and one of the other things that I made a decision too, because it was nascent tech and nobody really knew about it. I went out and started looking who else in Australia or around the world was building with this tech, and could I find people that were doing this as well? And that's when I found Leanne Kemp from Everledger, and I went and traveled. This is the other thing. On the upside was that I traveled. I did things before COVID. I got to travel to New York. I'd never been to New York before. And they had the biggest blockchain conference in the world. I went to New York. Had massive imposter syndrome, but I went. And then I came back to Australia and went, and I went to my very first Women in Blockchain meetup in New York. And I was blown away because I was around women who were interested in this technology, but not from under the hood. Under the hood was important, but it was strategy, it was philosophy. It was like, why should we care about this? And it really challenged me. When I came back to Australia, I started a meetup. And that's what you do. You don't wait for permission. you have to become, if you're going to be a CEO or a founder or a leader in your field, you have to find your voice. So I did things that were really out of my comfort zone. I started a meetup. I found my way to be on panels, which freaked me out, but I did. And then now, 4 years later, we won Australia Emerging FinTech of the Year in 2018, which blew my mind because we're blockchain, not FinTech. And that was the same year that Afterpay won. Look at them, they're gazillionaires now. We're still struggling, but that's okay. So it's those moments that you sort of go, people are validating you, so listen to that. But yeah, it's hard work. It is hard work.
And I think the thing that's really interesting is that it is, the journey is up and down. And that's what I've definitely also experienced with some of our local entrepreneurs. The journey is very up and down. And if you can't dig deep, as you said, and pull yourself out of the down times and remember why you started this in the first place, and find a way to move forward.
Yeah, look, it's
just not going to work.
Because you probably said it too. One of the things when we got rejected by Water Ledger, by the Entrepreneur Committee of Australia, you know, we kind of went, oh, that's it. But what happens was that for a full year, it's the metaphorical brick wall that all of us startups understand. You know, you're trying to break through that brick wall, that metaphorical brick wall, and we've thought that we were going to push through with water. We kind of went, yeah, this is it, because, you know, Australia's the most mature water markets in the world. We're leaders. But the money went to somebody else. It went to an engineer. $1 million went to an engineering company, a water engineering company, and they built an aggregation platform that's not even complete still after all these years. But that's fine, because that was the safest option for the government to go with. But what happened is that what we had been working, we did break through the wall, because as soon as we got rejected by the Entrepreneurs Committee, while we were waiting for the decision on whether we were going to get funded to do the next stage for Water Ledger, we went through the process of applying or responding to IP Australia's EOI on Digital Transformation Agency's marketplace for a blockchain company to work with them to explore blockchain technology. And we got through the EOI process. They only there was a pool of about, I think they received about 16 or 20 applications from the market. And they said they were only going to select 3 companies. And we were one of the 3 companies, and we were up against Accenture and Boston Consultancy Group. Here we are, this little startup, tiny startup, and they chose us. And then we worked with IP Australia for a year. Now that's what I'm talking about, is that you have this big, oh my God, you've just been rejected. Then all of a sudden, you have to be focused, and you realise that you're creating opportunities all the way through everything, and then this one arrived. And then that gave us a year's worth of engagement with IP Australia, and that took us to Geneva over in the World Intellectual Property Organisation. And interesting enough, today there's a consortium of us that are making a submission to the Department of Finance, of Foreign Affairs and Trade, to look at digital technologies between India and Australia. And I've put forward the work we did with IP Australia up as a use case to really build that shared infrastructure for digitalisation of patents between Australia and India, so we can actually innovate faster and all that sort of stuff. But again, 2 years later. So it's a long game here. And I think you've really got to know that it's not like you're just going to turn up and next minute you've got people throwing flat $1 at you and you're now Afterpay.
Yeah,
it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's fast paced, but it's the long game. So it's like running a marathon and a sprint all in the same time, and you have to find the balance to be able to do that well.
Yeah, and the killer that will kill you is cash, and we have been to the brink quite a few times. And this is why your R&D is critical, having a really good accountant, making sure
and
you're
knowing your numbers,
making sure you're getting all your tax done and your BAS and all that sort of stuff, and making sure that, you know, if you are dedicating time to R&D, just making sure that you're documenting it clearly. So when you go through your tax base, you can actually, because you have to do your R&D, get your R&D number before you put your tax in. And you want to do that as soon as the 1st of July comes, you're doing that process, because it takes about 2 weeks to get your number. And then as soon as you get your number, then you can put your tax return in, and then 10 days later, you got your tax return. So that is really critical cash flow at the start of your financial year. So it's all these little things as a CEO you have to be on top of everything else. And it's as boring as it is, it's critical, because cash will kill you. It's not your customers. It's not the ecosystem. Unfortunately, it always says 3 things that will kill you. Your cash, or your co-founders will kill you.
Yeah.
Co-founders, because your capital table implodes. So your co-founders will kill you, cash will kill you, or your customers will kill you. So, because that's another thing, so don't just bank on one customer. They'll kill you.
Yeah, absolutely. Too risky, way too risky.
Oh yeah, as soon as you get your first, you've got to get your second and your third, because the rest they'll just kill you. Yeah.
Katrina, thank you so very much. Can you believe that we have spent, I feel like 45 minutes already? 49 minutes we've been chatting. It's just went like that.
Well, I guess I just want to leave, like, I mean, it's really critical. I mean, I know I've sort of probably gone, oh, this is just so heavy and all that sort of stuff, but it's really important that you hear a reality. It's not, but also remember too that by choosing to become an entrepreneur or do a co-founder or become a tech startup, it gives you an enormous amount of freedom. It gives you the freedom to think and create and innovate and meet amazing people. And you become the person that you really wanted to be all these years, but your workplace was constraining you from doing that.
Confining you, yes, constraining you.
Because your journey is determined by you. Nobody's standing there telling you have to turn up to work at 9 o'clock. Nobody's there standing to go, you've been on a lunch hour for half an hour, where are you going? Nobody's telling you that. And it's great. And so, you know, so one of the things about last piece, and it's not related to any sort of financial stuff, but it's about you. One of the most important people in your entire startup, in your entire journey, is you. And if you're not healthy, if you're not present, and you're not in the moment, it has a massive effect. So take it easy on the alcohol. Cap that. Don't go hard on the alcohol on weeknights. Please don't do that. Go to the gym. Just make sure you're moving, because when you're sitting on your ass for years and years and years trying to solve problems, the most important thing is keeping yourself healthy. So making sure you get your good hour of sleep, get to the gym, drink lots of water, eat healthy, be present. Critically important. Yeah, stay off the alcohol.
That's amazing advice, I think, to end our first HubLive for 2021. And just before we go, I also just want to quickly say that Katrina mentioned Mark from BDO, and we are collaborating with them very soon, actually. Very, very soon. I think that our first workshop with them is next Tuesday. So we'll be sending out lots of information and marketing on our socials, but also if you're a member or if you're on our database, you'll get that in your inbox. So please have a look with the subject line says, you know, workshop through BDO. Yeah. Very, very worthwhile. We're going to do 3 workshops with them.
Yes. If all of you who are just do it, I emphasize, because we were the first cohort through CEO school, and even though we were the guinea pigs, I cannot highly recommend it enough. Please listen to Elise. She knows what she's doing. Sign up to the BDO, get to know Mark. Your life will change.
Oh, thank you so much, Katrina. Thank you for all your words of wisdom. And we can't wait to see you take the company to the next level and beyond and scale really quickly. That's where it's going, right? Are we entering a phase of scaling?
Yeah, I hope so. I hope so. It's still hard work. It's hard work, but it's always about hard work and making sure you're thinking all the time. But I'm always happy I'm always happy to come up to Rocky. I enjoyed myself so much last year at Rock Vegas, because I'm sure all of your viewers know how Bris Vegas got its name, and it's because of you guys that Brisbane has the name Bris Vegas. It's because of the Rocky kids in the 80s.
I love it.
Yeah, but no,
so
I mean,
we would love to have you here. Absolutely love to do. We're going to do many events and also female founder focused events, and I think it would be wonderful to see you in Rock Vegas, but also here more specifically at the Smart Hub.
Yeah, love to just also let you just ask questions, and and I'm always I'm on LinkedIn and all that sort of stuff, so find me on LinkedIn, and always happy to do Zoom calls if you've got any questions that you want to particularly ask about. But you're going to be in great hands. You've got a lease, you got BDO, you've got the entrepreneur's office. So, but just don't get obsessed with the hoodies or the t-shirts.
Or the alcohol.
You can drink, but just take it easy, because you need to be on. You need to be alert.
Yeah, that's awesome. Katrina, Civic Ledger, thank you so much. We look forward to seeing you in Brisbane soon. Hope you have a wonderful week. And we look forward to seeing you not in next week. We're doing these HubLives fortnightly this year. And so we'll see you in a fortnight's time. Take care.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.